a visual piece inside. Tom Pickard, Prynne, Elaine Randall, Tom Rayworth, Jeremy Reed, Carl Reedy, John Riley, Peter Riley, William Sherman, Colin Sims, Ian Sinclair, Ken Smith, John Temple, Chris Torrance, Gail Turnbull and John Welch. And I don't think you'll ever see a kind of collection of poets put together like that before, but it was done for the French, and it wasn't chronological, it wasn't alphabetical, it was done in two different ways. Pierre was bringing to it his friendship with Jerome Rothenberg and the way he was putting together anthologies, and my magazine was going more towards an essay, so this was something you could read from beginning to end like an essay. So it was into 4 sections: process, place, body and language. You know, there were lots of us fitted into all of those. We were taking people who fitted predominantly into those areas and linking them all up and then taking quotes from various people. And if you can find copies of this, it's still it's bilingual as well. So it's really quite a valuable collection, and I don't think it's been surpassed yet. I don't think anyone's got anything like it at all. The French were really quite perceptive in picking up on that. Not only did it mark the period, but it marked a very radical way of writing that was going on in this country and has still got its spores around. So Pierre used to come by regularly, so we just ran tapes. And again, what's interesting about these is because it was never released, they were never edited, so sometimes you would talk in it, and in fact I think 2 things are recorded the same on either side, but obviously if you listen to the whole thing you'll find it different recorded. It was a year later. This is a bit of, once again, Pierre went to live in America, so he was into that whole other area of the oral that you find with Robert Kelly and Ginsberg, for example, all those beat poets, all the people coming off Black Mountain, Olsen, you know, this idea of the line and length and breadth and whatever, and you can hear that in Pierre, although he comes from Luxembourg originally.
Film called Artaud and Schreiber. Light all around, heavy lights through which the flying insects burrow. Oh, to fill their path with lead, let it harden at night's blind air, to see the whole process of their flow the next morning, standing there, arrested in the early light. Light I lie in, so all-pervasive I cannot hide in it, changed into heat it goes to work on me. Prostrate in the sun I can no longer move. The pores of my skin shine forth, opening up and out they form a micro-grill, barely surrounding my body. I have become transparent. Anyone may look in on me, casually stare into me, examine my lungs, liver, spleen, stomach. I cannot hide from my body. I can see my organs, projected on rays of light out of my transparent body, trembling, dripping holographic pictures in mid-air. There by the blossoming apple tree, my lungs, my stomach caught on a high branch of the run, my guts uncorked, streak at high noon like immense glistening vapor trails. I have undone my body. I stand revealed in the afternoon light. No darkness here, none, except for the garden shed, bolted and its windows nailed shut, from inside of which there comes a voice, faint at first, then louder, clearer. It rises like a howl that shakes the sun in the sky, like a fist shaking a fruit from a tree. I recognize it. It is Artaud, and his words become clear. He is reciting a mantra. No mouth, no tongue, no teeth, no larynx, no esophagus, no stomach, no belly, no asshole, no mouth. It all comes back together. A movie played backwards at a roll, I mean at faster speed. The implosion squeezes lungs, liver, stomach, viscera, back through the scintillating pores that closed over my body, clouds drawing in front of the sun. Thank you, Monsieur Artaud.
It's a way of reading that's very different from the way he talks as well. It's this kind of very genteel type. He's not that type of person at all. It's I find quite interesting. Right, but I did actually advertise on the very last page of it turned out to be the last issue, that the cassettes number 4 and 5 would be by Alan Fisher and Ian Sinclair, and then after that would be Bill Griffiths and Pierre Joris. Well, it turned out that I've never ever received a tape from Ian. I mean, he used to send me manuscripts, and I've got manuscripts at home, and I've got books and early books and all this kind of stuff. Never had a manuscript. Whereas Alan, because Alan was very much into the aura as well, was always sending tapes, quite often recorded in the home, or a performance piece, a private performance piece, or things with Eric von der Michel, whose son Tris von der Michel is kind of in the art world now. And he would make things, and sometimes he would just record things. The books weren't published, and this is one of them. It's called The Apocalyptic Sonnets, and he recorded it very low key at 11:35 at night. It says on the thing or something. He says at one point. But he, once again, he's wandering. He's talking about it being a master tape, then he keeps wandering away from the recording, then coming back, and there's no balance in it at all. So James has actually taken some of the background noise out of it in the process, because otherwise it becomes difficult. But this is also dedicated to Cozy and Genesis, and their reference is based on Durar's work, but he references other things in, and I'd forgotten about it, but there's a reference to my book Lust and to the concept of all the censorship problems I was having. So once again, it's all this linking of everyone together, and then he published it as a book eventually with Robert Clark doing some prints at the front. So I'm going to put a bit. Once again, Alan has got another. He wants to inform you on things. It's very informative, his work. Quite gentle, quite quiet. And he wants to make these private recordings and send them to people.
This is painful. Again, this is from a track from straight line schools.
This is the master tape, so when it's mastered, you've lost some of that noise.
By the Dog Factory, the ICA last October. The Wedding March, addressed to Howard Lever MP, Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Minister for the Arts. This music breaks into my chest, converts foresights running, synthesizes income, this overwhelming sanity, swimming gyrations of sonority, cuts in to the situation, this situation, an interface between Russia and washed, the stoned or damned, by pulse-amplified scream left recurring on walnut threads, breaking security's skins. The nervous chat platitudes filled with frozen fish with lemon acid make their taste buds unify its voice. Rescale its biochords strapped in real thongs. In Westminster, marble stitches rip dollars to crush gold out of the roughness before avenging angels, Chris and Sleazy, John Cozy, forcefully peel paint from hysteric forges of art. From the thrones of the orders' throats, shriek beneath badges, maces of dignity, cold metal media cuts its tossed pound, fear closing its fists into craftsmen's jaws, publishes the let blood in columns of rational quackery, given sanctity by a Christian public over-eager to keep their tarot, their democratic seers, whose four black angels use technology, exploit the exploiters, feed back the questionnaires, feed back the tampons before government grips control of human genes.
It's interesting because I said, once again, these people who link in, I don't have contact with Genesis anymore, but I do with Cozy, because she's part of the Cabinet Gallery, and I'm part of the Cabinet Gallery, and all that type of stuff. So, always these things. I don't think Alan's got contact with Genesis or Cozy anymore. Right. In America, one of the people I was contacting was Robert Kelly. one of the giants of American poetry, literally as well. Very tall, and at one point he was like this as well. He teaches at Bard. He comes from the New York school that's surrounded by David Antin, Jerry Rothenberg, Clayton Eshelman, Rachel Owens, Diane Wiskowski. They all went different ways, but it was formed in New York. There was a magazine called Something and various others, and the Something Else Press, and it comes from that, from their association with Dick Higgins and whatever. Robert went up to Bard and kind of formed a community around that, which then has Station Hill Press, which did the Blanc Show and various other things. But he was one of those very generous souls. In fact, as you can imagine, I haven't actually contacted him for years, and I suddenly writing to him out of the blue to ask about permission for this. And he comes back, he's 85 now, still kind of, really friendly, hello Paul, as if it was like yesterday. And back to this, what are you doing? Come on, what's correspondence? Correspondence. They talk about things. And we were going to put a benefit on in Hebden Bridge for curtains. So a whole lot of different people would be there who lived in Hebden Bridge. We worked this ivory tower on the hill type of thing. So I asked him if he would send me a tape, and Glenda and I were going to read Bataille, Belmer, Clayton Eshelman, and Diane Wiskowski, and we were going to have this tape of his, and I think we had some from Genesis and Codes as well. I think. And this is beautiful Robert talking. Big guy, but listen to this voice.
In July, May and June and August and into the more recent time, I've been working in different takes on a piece on Persephone, the goddess of under the ground. You know the story. She is the daughter of Corey, who is captured, carried off, while she is, in one version of the story, the one that's most in my mind, while she's gathering flowers, is carried off by the god of the dead into the underworld, and then she is there half the year and here half the year. See, the old story. And I could tell when I began writing this, it wasn't any more than any of my poems written with a deliberate start. I wasn't deliberately intending this, but gradually it became clear what I was doing when I was writing about Persephone. And then I realized that this had been obviously something that had been close to me all my life without being able to focus it as such. This is the preface. Has the sun begun yet? I feel the sun through the cloud cover burning down. Will sun be the only song? I am of those heretics who are glad in rain, love fog, wind, all business of the lower air, those caresses. Keep the noosphere turbulent over the cities of the periwinkle. And who asked am I to speak? Our speech will serve for any. Down here are the dead, whose names alone matter. They return, a taste in our mouths, not easy to refuse, to say their names like a lover in the woods, saying the name of the beloved, to no better audience than trees. We are the trees of their wood, the dead. They carve their glyphs in us. We speak them in our world, not for memory's sake. We do not sit around with the dead reminiscing. We do not remember. We listen to hear them tell through our mouths the annals of that kingdom closer to truth, but not true yet. They deceive us with their metaphors, their rhythms, and their hopes. They cheat us with clear images.
There's another one too, who also, you hear pages and pages being turned over as he's kind of, as if it's meant to be part of it. I always find that kind of aspect fascinating, the way we build in all these parts. This kind of links into this in the sense that I started another magazine called Twisted Wrist, which initially it was started because it was getting quite a long while between issues because they were getting so big and taking so long to translate and everything, and things would come along which didn't fit into the themes more really. So but I wanted urgently to publish them. So I was publishing them. I did a play by Jean Paris from the Change group. And to people who'd never even been in curtains before. Boom, boom, boom. Alan Fisher was the first one. And they could take on whatever form they wanted, depending on what the piece was. I received this from Chris Cheek. Chris was a younger generation than me, and he was coming out of the Bob Cobbing, Lawrence Upton, Bill Griffiths, doing sound poetry, excuse me, and performance work. He was obviously interested in calligraphy as well, and so this is how he was writing the pieces. And I have various tapes he was sending me. It doesn't look nearly, I mean obviously it's like that, wait on here, it doesn't quite come out like that, it's very much black and white, so you're privileged to see this because now you think, oh that's a bit miserable now, isn't it, considering what the original looks like. Quite nice to scan this in now and do it like that, that's an idea. He used to send me tapes. If there was anyone else listening back, I thought, oh, I know that. And I realised that in fact he'd done, I mean obviously if I go into my archive and all my letters I'd find it, but he'd done a recording of this. And I've just put it into surface. You see a certain relationship to what I'm about, but he's coming at it from the sound poetry thing, whereas I'm making the sound, but I'm also interested in the body and in the emotional aspect of it. I'm not saying he's not interested in that, but it's not so much the dominant game. He's much more into language games and sound games. So, let's see what I lined up. Plays a few instruments, he bangs on a few things as well.
Moved in water. Moved in water. She comes in an opening space. Earth in her throat. Feet walk on it. Stamp and stamp again, the rhythm she must break. Its hideous glass of homage, muscles of perpetual rock, he crawls into the cave and shouts, he clutches, links was wetness, bound. Like scent they wear, the act, coiling shell of disguise, spirals of power and pretense. Stone. How to perform this?
At the very end, I realised that it was just a one-off thing. He had just done it for me. He hadn't kept a copy. He said, "That's all for tonight, mate. See ya." And he happened to be, he's in America now. And I wrote to him the other day, obviously I was asking permission and all that. And I said, "Do you have a copy of that?" And he goes, "No, I made it and just sent it to you." I said, "I've never even heard it." He said, "I'm looking forward to this coming out, I better hear it again." And that's really, at the very beginning, this is interpreted by lots and lots of sounds. Things like that. using it as a score in the same. In fact, even Alan Fisher calls his piece 16 scores. Different concepts of score as well. But as I say, Chris has more the sound, and whereas I was taking it from another area, and I'm suddenly going to interject here Michael McClure. At the same time as I met Kathy Acker in 1979 is when I met Michael McClure. The only reason I went to this poetry festival in Amsterdam, One World Poetry, so I didn't really want to go to all these beat poets. That's not really my scene at all. Burroughs, I've seen Burroughs before anyway, and Geeson, and I knew they'd be kind of Amsterdam and Burroughs. My goodness, you know exactly what that was going to be like. And you know, it was God. So I went because I saw the name of Kathy Acker, and because I saw Michael McClure, and I saw Ed Dawn. Ed Dawn I'd met years ago, but Michael McClure interested me. It's not just a matter of these like ghost tantrums, which are like this. So, what interested Michael was also the breathing, and he was doing a sound check, and I had to come in, boom, boom, so I could spend some time talking to him about this. He used to go to the zoo. He comes from San Francisco, so he used to go to the zoo there and stand in front of the snow leopards and watch the way that they move. And that's really how what he had taken on himself. He was interested in, and if you read his writings, of course he's interested in Artaud as well. And of course, once again, he's another person that wrote plays, the famous one being The Beard, which was put on the rather cool, you know, had all these problems because of cunnilingus and all the rest of it. And he also wrote prose work as well. So I had this kind of affinity with him, so we talked and whatever. But that's what I'm interested in, all these various things, how you work with the body as well. And of course, straight up while we were talking, the next guy came on, who's a well-known German writer. He sat down at a table and I shoved it straight into his thing. I was trying to read like, but he wasn't doing it on purpose, he was just trying to read properly. And I said to Michael, turn around, I don't think she wants to look at this. And so we carried on our conversation and slowly drifted out the door. But, so that was where I met Kathy Acker. Straight away, I went because I had, Nick Kimberley and Compendium had given me a book, well, sold me a book, The Childlike Life of the Black Tarantula by the Black Tarantula, which was Kathy Acker. He thought I'd written it because of that combination of sex and murderers, and knew that I was writing about crime and serial killers, which was one of the things I did to earn a living. So he thought I'd done this. So, but I liked what I was, so when her name came up on this handout to say, this is what would you like to come and do, so I went there. Of course, her ex-husband, Peter Gordon, was just arriving in town with Lou Reed that night, so I didn't really get to her, and she said, oh, 2 weeks' time I'm going to be in Paris, and I said, I'll be in Paris. Okay, let's meet in Paris. So we met in Paris, and then it's kind of erupted our relationship. I had Glenda with me at the time, and the three of us kind of rolling around the place, and I was introducing her to the Change group and various other people. And we just kind of bonded like that. She wanted to leave America and come and live over here. So we started a correspondence, about 22 letters or even more, I think, which I published in a... Never mind, poor old David. Oh. Okay. And a book called Spread Wide, where I put all her letters facsimile, and everyone's going on about her letters with Mackenzie Walker at the moment. Well, this was done in 2004. So our letters are 1979 to 80 to 81. And then I also I've got contribution from Richard Foreman and other people, because these letters weren't intended to be published. So she's saying really rude things about people. Not dear Eruca John, not dear Susan Sontag, but this is even worse than some of the remarks she makes on people. But which is her way of doing it. But I was appropriating her text and then spinning other texts out of it. But at the same time, she was writing Great Expectations, And so in the process of this, not only were we talking about Bataille, because I was one of the people who introduced her to Bataille, Pierre Guillotin, etc. She's saying who she's reading at the moment. And when you follow through Great Expectations, you can see all these people that she's been reading. And it's, well, Chris Kraus at the moment is just kind of going through it all, so it's going to be helpful for the book that she's writing. But somewhere down the line, Kathy sent me a tape of her reading from the Persian poems, taken off a radio station over there. It doesn't exist, no one else has got a copy of it. And James has balanced it up, and I'm not going to play the very beginning bit. But, so once again, she's reading the Persian poems, censored, because the word cunt is not allowed on the radio, and it becomes the word box. I'm not sure what we're going to hear us in there. Which is interesting in itself. Although she's got it in Blood and Guts, and this was another version she did with illustrations by Robert Kushner. I've never seen any other copies of that. Anyway, she talks before she reads, which is another thing, once again, these things that these tapes can produce. You've got these things that, and she's just like talking, improvising. She doesn't always do that well, like I don't always do it well, but this is quite good. Have I got it in the right place?
I'd like to say something, not so much about what I'm going to read right now, but just generally about what I think, or something I think about a lot in terms of my writing, which is, it seems very questionable now. One of the main questions for writers is, especially for non-commercial and/or experimental writers, is why anybody writes. Why bother? Most of us are used to writing that is basically propaganda, such as newspaper writing, writing on TV, whatever. And there seems to be very little use. I quite disagree with this, but in given standards of the societies and they exist, there seems to be very little use for non-propaganda language. It's as if there's almost no possibility of communication anymore. And so, again and again, I come back to this image of a girl being alone in a room, a girl being locked up in a room by a Persian man, and she being all alone in this room, has no way of talking to anyone, has no language, there's no communication that's possible. One day, this girl finds a Persian grammar book in a dusty, old, forgotten corner of the room. And because she finds this Persian grammar book, suddenly there's a possibility that she can talk again. She can talk to the man who locked her up. And because of this one little chance of language, she begins to write. And her first way of writing, her first language, are the Persian poems.
Inserted this music. The program started off with this music as well.
Kathy is in a room. The room is small. Culture stinks. Books and great men and the fine arts. Beautiful women. A beautiful woman. The red night. A deserted street. A beautiful woman. A red night. A street is a desert. Kathy's all alone in her room. She's learning Persian slowly. This peasant. That peasant. Good peasant.
Of course, in the book it's not Kathy at all, it's Janie. Janie is a girl the world has read, and that's always been accepted as Janie and ignored things. But at the same time she talks about Kathy, because she often uses Kathy. That's why people confuse her with, like Kathy Goes to Haiti, and what she talks about in here, that an unnamed, well, it's named there. One of the language poets tries to jump her because he expects her to be like Kathy Goes to Haiti, which is the story of her life and this type of thing. Right. There's one person I didn't put in there, who is actually the mentor to Kathy, the person that helped her in the very first place, and that was David Antin. I first came across David Antin in 1967 in Better Books, where I was working, and I had correspondence with him. I wanted him to be in my magazine. I couldn't get him into the magazine because he was writing these things called talk pieces, which he taped, came to a place where he didn't actually have any poems or anything like that. He just came and he talked. And he did these pieces. And it's not quite like a teacher standing in front of you and just kind of giving you an hour and a half club, like I'm doing here. He actually has got ideas that he wants to talk about, and he lines them all up, and then he links them as he goes along. He came to the Cabinet Gallery. It was the first time he's ever performed in this country. 2009 he came to the Cabinet Gallery, and I'm afraid he's now in the first stages of Alzheimer's. So he was actually playing on the fact of losing his memory as part of the actual performance piece. But it's not just a matter of the tapes, because he was taping everything, and then those tapes are then transformed. Obviously, at that time I was thinking I just wanted one of those pieces that he had written up afterwards. Let's give an example. His way of doing it is it's called the formulaic method, really. It goes right way back to Homer, to the Odyssey and the Iliad, and that is that you're not just inventing, talking off the top of your head. You actually are using a kind of building blocks. So in Homer, in the Odyssey, when Achilles is used, it goes swift-heeled Achilles. Once upon a time, we go down to the beach. These are kind of like building blocks. They repeat quite a lot of times through the thing. So all the time when they are said, your mind can then move on to think about what you're going to invent. And that is how the Odyssey was done. Over a period of time, it's slowly invented and got longer and longer. It's like going into a pub and seeing the old man in the corner who's telling Shaggy Dog's story. You go back a year later, he's telling the same story, but that story is now evolved into something else. There's other facts, whether they're true or whether they are invented, is what happens. Or in simpler form would be the blues. You say a line, and then you're repeating that line. While you're repeating that line, you're thinking of the next line, and then you go back to the first line, and then you have a killer line, and you go back to the first line again. It's a way of thinking, and exactly the same there. So it's exactly, when we talk, when I talk as well, when most of us talk, we use things like, like they're our kind of stuttering things to enable us to think. So when David Antin was talking, remarkably doesn't use too much of that, but he does use a certain amount of repetition because he's thinking, he's interested in the concept of thinking. How do you think? So he then takes those things and then transcribes them, or has them transcribed, then he then cuts out bits, finds the rhythms in it. So this is just the start. It's quite funny because I just picked this up at random. So I just opened it at random because there's a number of things I could have done. So this is how it is when he does his talk. So he kind of gets into it by going like this. When I agreed to come here, to Indiana, Barry Albert didn't have a title for what I was going to talk about. I think maybe he forgot to ask me, which was, I suppose, just as well, because he had an idea, I'd given it to him, of the kind of thing I was now doing. And I had an idea too of going places to talk to people. I was seeking an occasion for the kind of talking I want to do, which would of course modify the kind of talking I wanted to do, and how I was no longer so clearly a poet, a linguist, an art critic, all of which I had so clearly been. And how my work was therefore no longer so clearly a poem, a criticism, an investigation, but somehow lying between them, or on their borders. And then it came to me, on a voucher I had to sign to collect my cheque, Barry had to tell the various people who had sponsored me, the Department of English, the Department of Art, and a library, what I was going to do, so that I could get paid, or so they'd have some idea what I was going to do. And there it was on the voucher, my subject, it said, talking at the boundaries. And I had to sign it, and I signed it in the wrong place, and the same voucher came back to me in the mail. And I considered it a great piece of good fortune to encounter my subject on a voucher and sign for it, making me responsible. It seemed a good title because it made sense in terms of the place and my reason for going to places, to improvise something. Because as a poet, I was getting extremely tired of what I considered an unnatural language act, going into a closet, so to speak, sitting in front of a typewriter, because anything is possible in a closet in front of a typewriter, and nothing is necessary. A closet is no place to address anybody or anything. And it's so unnatural sitting in front of a typewriter that you don't address anyone. And then it goes on like that, right. And then I just kind of looked across the page, which I thought was quite funny, and it says, so he's talking about the boundaries, talking about the boundaries. That there's a boundary here. Maybe, let's assume that there's a boundary here. Maybe the intersection of 3 states. There are some states in places in the United States where you can stand on the borders of 3 states and you're at the intersection of